All right. Hey, everybody. How you doing? Jeff here. I'm here to talk to you today about standardized tests, the SAT and the ACT. Um, just a quick bit about me. I've been a teacher for about 10 years now. I graduated from NYU in 2006 with a degree in linguistics. Um, I've taught English. I've taught test prep, GRE, GMAT, SAT, ACT. I've been with Hale. This is my third year now. So we specialize now in just teaching high school students. So I'm going to very quickly talk about the SAT and the ACT and the differences, because I do want to get onto something that'll be more fun, the ACT science section, which is what we're going to talk about today. So SAT and ACT are, undergraduate admissions tests. Every college and university in the US and Canada accepts both of these tests without preference. A big question I get asked often is, do some universities prefer SAT or do some prefer ACT? The answer is absolutely not. What you should do is take a diagnostic test for both of these exams, and whichever one you score better on should be the one you prepare for. So let's talk a little bit more about how these tests are scored. The SAT has 4 sections here: reading, writing, and then 2 math sections. These are scored from 200 to 800, and then those are added together to give you a composite score, which is the sum. The essay, which is optional, scored from 6 to 24. The ACT is also 4 sections. It's English, math, reading, and science. It's strangely scored from 1 to 36, and your scores are averaged. So there's no hiding on the SAT because the scores are added together. Whereas on the ACT, if you don't do well in one of the sections, it's not the end of the world because your scores are going to be averaged. The writing section is optional. It's scored from 2 to 12. So another common question I get asked a lot by students is, if the essay is optional, why would I take it? Why should I take the SAT essay or the ACT essay if they're optional? And the answer is they're not really optional for you. They're optional for colleges to require of you. So if you're applying to a college in, say, California, and they require the essay, then you must take the essay. Which one should I take, SAT or ACT? Now, as I mentioned before, all colleges take either, and you should take whichever one you are best at, which means you should sit for a practice test for the SAT and a practice test for the ACT and compare your scores. The ACT has a science section in it, and a lot of students are scared of science. Maybe it's not their best subject. Maybe they just get spooked. I don't know. So a question I get asked pretty often is, what kind of science is on the ACT science? Can I pass the science test if I don't like science, if I don't have a background in science? And the answer is yes. The science on the ACT is not actual science. It is what is called scientific reasoning. Now, this actually brings me to a larger point about these standardized tests, which are a lot of students, they're afraid that if they don't do well on these standardized tests, that it's a reflection of their intellectual ability. And they think that, oh, I can't get a 1500, I must be stupid. I try to combat that attitude in as many forms as I can. The SAT and ACT measure how well you can take the SAT and ACT. These are not measures of intellect. They can be coached, they can be learned. An ACT science, you could pass it if you've never taken a science class. While the test has biology, for example, and chemistry and physical and natural science and physics, you do not have to have a background in any of those fields in order to ace the science section on the ACT. And I will actually show you some science passages and science questions, and you will go, wow, I didn't need any background knowledge to solve that question. So how does the ACT science section work? Well, here it is. Here's the breakdown. It's the fourth and final section of the ACT. You get 35 minutes to do 40 questions, and there'll be anywhere from 5 to 7 passages. I have the breakdown here in red, 52.5 seconds per question, or approximately 6 minutes per passage. There are 3 different passage types that you're going to see. There are basically 3 different things that the passages will ask you to do. The first passage type is called charts and graphs. It's graphical interpretation. There are going to be 2 to 3 passages. The cool thing is it's almost entirely graphs. It's charts, it's tables. It's like very little reading. Research summaries is next. This is one where they talk about scientific experiments and require you to analyze them. They're arguably the hardest one. And then we'll talk about the final passage type, which is called conflicting viewpoints. There will only ever be 1 passage. Very little charts and graphs. It's going to be mostly reading. This is essentially like the reading passages all over again, but with science. All right, this is a sample passage with no questions. This is just the charts and graphs. So they'll give you this passage and they'll give you about 5, 6, or 7 questions about all of this data. Now, the first thing that you are probably tempted to do is read. But the first thing I tell students when we're learning ACT science is that you only need to read in order to answer the question. If you can answer a question without reading, then don't read, because you don't get any points for understanding the passage. So let's take a look at a sample question here, question 8. It says, according to figure 1, at a temperature of 600 K, which of calcium, aluminum, and gold have or has a resistivity greater than 7 times 10 to the negative 8 ohm meters? Now, if that has you, that has your brain doing cartwheels, don't overthink it. They're asking us about a temperature of 600 K, and boom, here that is in our graph. That is our y-axis. And they're asking about resistivity, which is our y-axis. And it says where resistivity is greater than 7 times 10 to the negative 8, that would be here, 7 times 10 to the negative 8. And if you look at the key, you'll see that calcium is the only one that is higher. Boom, so the answer is F. A lot of students, when they first approach ACT science, they just want to understand everything, because that's how we, as learners, approach material. Like, oh, I need to read about resistivity and conductivity and what is an ohm, But I tell students, you only get points for questions you answer correctly. You don't get points for understanding. Here is another question. Let's check out question 35 here. It says, based on figure 3, the depth of the steel ball in the motor oil at time equals 50 milliseconds would most likely have been closest to which of the following? Now, the last question just asked us to interpret what was on the graph. It's called an interpolate question, because we're just finding data that's in the graph. But what you might notice about this question is that there is no time of 50 milliseconds. So they're asking us to extrapolate based on the trends. So we're going to physically draw a line here to extend our x-axis. And I'm going to physically extend the line for motor oil because that's what the question is asking us about. I'm going to say, great, approximately where is that line on the y-axis? And it looks like motor oil here is somewhere above 2 millimeters in depth. So the answer's got to be D. Yeah. So this is charts and graphs. This is graphical interpretation. You can see it is kind of straightforward. I assure you the questions do get much more difficult, but the theme remains the same. On to my favorite. These are research summaries. Now you can see this is the passage. No questions. They have given us a ton of information. Now again, you're going to be like most of my students and you're going to run and try to read everything and understand everything. Let's pump the brakes. Let's look at the first question. Number 18 says, according to the results of the studies, for a given coil and a given liquid, as the current passes through the coil, as the current that passed through the coil was increased, then delta T did what? So they're asking us about the relationship between current and delta T. So we may need to read a little bit here. Let's just read the introduction. Start here. Okay, in 2 studies, students recorded the temperature changes that occurred in different liquids when the liquids were heated for 10 minutes each by various metal coils through which selected amounts of electrical current flowed. Okay, so what do we know? Electrical current is I. Let's keep going. For each trial in the studies, the students carried out the following procedure. First, they poured 400 milliliters of a liquid into an insulated container fitted with a thermometer and a metal coil, and sealed the container. See diagram. All right, let's keep going. With the liquid, the container and the coil at room temperature, 25 degrees Celsius, the students began to stir the liquid with a magnetic stirrer. Next, they adjusted the voltage across the ends of the coil until I reached the desired value. And we know from previously reading, I is electrical current. For the next 10 minutes, they continued to stir the liquid. After 10 minutes of heating, they recorded T, the liquid's temperature, and computed delta T, which is the difference between T and the liquid's initial temperature. Okay. So that means that here, my y-axis is delta T, which is change in temperature. And here, my x-axis is IA, which I know is electrical current in terms of amps. So as current increases, what happens to delta T? What happens to the change in temperature? It increases. The answer's got to be F. All right. So this is research summaries. You can see it's sort of like graphical interpretation on steroids. We still have to interpret charts and graphs, but we also have to read. Let's do another question. Check out question 19. It says, based on the results of the studies, to obtain the lowest delta T after 10 minutes of heating at a given I, using the apparatus diagrammed in the passage, the students should select which liquid and which metal coil. One of the tricks for solving a lot of ACT science questions is to let the answer choices help you. Liquid says water, water, ethylene glycol, vegetable oil, and metal coil is copper, aluminum, tungsten, aluminum. Where do we see those in the passage? Well, it looks like Metal is the first chart, figure 1, and liquid is in the second one. And let's see, what do we want? Well, according to the question, we want to obtain the lowest delta T. Well, what gave us the lowest delta T? Well, we have a really low delta T here with copper, and I have a really low delta T here with water. So it looks like answer choice A is going to give us the lowest. Awesome. Let's keep going. This question is saying, the students stirred each liquid for which of the following reasons? So now is where we get to some of the trickier science questions. There's nothing to do here but process of elimination. So we start with answer choice F. Did they stir each liquid to provide additional heat? Does stirring provide heat? It does not. Answer choice G says, we stirred each liquid to ensure that the temperature was uniform. Well, where did we talk about stirring? Here in the passage. Let's keep it. How about, put a squiggle. How about H? We stirred the liquid to prevent the liquid from settling to the bottom of the container. We're not dealing with any kind of mixture or any kind of solute, so no, there's no settling that's going to happen. We wanted to prevent the liquid from contacting the metal coil. Well, that's crazy, because if you look at the diagram, the metal coil is in the liquid. So a great example of, I don't necessarily know that the answer is G. I don't know particularly why, but I know that F, H, and J are wrong, and we just have to go with what's left. All right. Let's move on. Conflicting viewpoints. So as I mentioned earlier, conflicting viewpoints is just like a reading passage. So this, you can see there's almost no charts and graphs here. It's all reading. Again, you may be tempted to read everything, but you should know the mantra by now. Don't read unless you have to. Now, let's take a sample question. It says, based on student 3's hypothesis, a wood mouse would be least likely to be captured by a predator during. Okay, so that means that I really only need this guy here, student 3. I don't need anything else. So let's just take student 3 and give him a read. Let's read. Wood mice are more likely to forage at sites with shelter than at sites without shelter, and they are more likely to forage when moonlight is absent than when moonlight is present. Both the presence of shelter and the absence of moonlight decrease the chance that a wood mouse will be captured by a predator. Therefore, the greatest number of wood mouse visits will be to foraging sites with shelter during the new moon. All right, I'm going to do what I tell a lot of students to do, which is look for trends in the data. If we have shelter, like present, shelter is present, we have more shelter, and if we have more absence of moonlight, well, more absence of moonlight just means less presence of moonlight, like less moonlight. What happens if we have more shelter, less moonlight? We have less of a chance of capture. So we're going to use process of elimination here. If we want to not be captured, then we need shelter. So we can get rid of G and J. And so we need a full moon. So we're gonna go with F here, a new moon at a foraging site with shelter. All right. Let me delete this. All right, let's check another question out. It's only 2 more, I think, so we're almost done. Number 3 here says, consider the results of the experiment during the new moon and during the full moon. For the site without shelter, are these results consistent with the hypothesis of student 1? So what do we need? We need the experiment, and we need student 1. So let's read. Let's start with student 1. Wood mice are more likely to forage when moonlight is absent than when moonlight is present. The absence of moonlight decreases the chance that a wood mouse will be captured by a predator. Therefore, the number of wood mouse visits to a foraging site will be greater during the new moon than during the full moon. Shelter has no effect on foraging behavior. So I don't really know why I'm reading, but I know what I'm reading. I know that if we have a new moon, we have increased foraging. That's what student 1 says. Let's take a look at the experiment. Over the course of several months, the students counted the number of wood mouse visits to a forage site with shelter and a foraging site without shelter during the new moon and during the full moon. See the table. So let's analyze this table. What do we have? Well, we notice that as we have more shelter, as shelter goes up, and new moon goes up as we have new moon, the number of visits increases. So based on this information, we know that we need to say no. These results, sorry, we need to say yes. These results are consistent with each other. And the difference between A and B is, do we have fewer visits during the new moon or more visits during the new moon? And you can see during the new moon here, we have more visits. Done. Answer choice B. Cool. So that's it for ACT Science. I hope you guys know a little bit more about this particular section. It gives a lot of students anxiety, but I'm sure, as you can see, it's really not that bad. So I want to open up the floor for questions here. If you guys have any questions, I encourage you to ask. I'm going to talk a little bit more about how COVID-19 has affected standardized testing. This is something I talked about last week. And there have been a few changes. So here are the dates you guys can take these standardized tests. You'll notice that subject tests are not offered on some of these dates. Oh, someone has a hand raised. Oh, yeah, do you have a question? Does anybody want to ask any questions? Can I give you the mic? How do I let you ask your question? Maybe Paul knows. Maybe Paul can help me out.
Hi, Jeff. I'm trying to unmute.
I'm trying to unmute her.
Yes, it's being difficult for me too.
Let's see, I'll just type a message to her and see if she has a question. Yeah, I don't see an option to unmute her. So we'll see. We'll see if she types a question.
That's strange.
Yes. So so we'll see if Shalini can type her question. We'll see if we can get the microphone here working. While we wait for that to happen, I wanted to mention something that I heard about standardized tests in the fall. SAT and ACT have both come out and said if schools don't reopen in the fall, then they will offer SAT and ACT testing at home. And this seems like a really great thing. Like, oh, wow, we can take the tests from our home. That's really convenient. But a couple of colleges have actually come out and said they will not accept test scores from a standardized test that is taken at home because it's a standardized test, which means it has to be administered in a standard fashion. And if not everybody is able to take the test, colleges and universities don't want to have anything to do with it. Believe it or not, there are a lot of equity issues here. Some students don't have a computer. They don't have internet access at home. Are we going to have students take the SAT off of a smartphone or off of a tablet? Colleges and universities are really concerned about inequity in the system. So they are actually protesting this decision by College Board and ACT to administer the test at home. So great. I have a question from someone who says, the ACT has two versions, the international and the US version. Is that correct? And why are there two versions? So yes, great question. There are two versions. Now, the ACT administered in the United States is a paper-based exam. In order to improve test security, the ACT is slowly moving to a computer-based exam that you take in a controlled environment, such as a computer lab or there's like companies that offer you to take standardized tests on their premises, like formal environment. When you take the computer-based ACT, there are a lot of constraints. For example, like the student's not allowed to have administrator access to the computer. The ACT takes security very serious. So that's why the international SAT, which is computer-based, has to be taken in a computer lab or some kind of formal environment. There is no content that is different between the two tests. It is only different in how it is administered. The structure is the same, the questions are the same. The only thing that bugs me about a computer-based test is that some of the techniques I teach students for writing, for example, on like a reading passage is to like mark up the passage and circle transition words and things like that. And students can't do that if it's on computer. So yeah, that kind of bums me out. But I hope that answers your question. There are two versions because one is international and computer-based, and one is national and paper-based, but they are the same. I am confident that in the next few years, the ACT is going to move even the US version, the national test, they're going to move that to the computer as well. All right. I hope I've answered your question there. I want to open up the floor to any other questions you guys might have, because I think we're nearing the end of the presentation here. I think I saw something now whereby you can highlight. Can you investigate? Yes, so you do get a highlighter. On the ACT computer-based exam, you have a highlight option where you can highlight material. Now, this is tragic. When the test first came out, I remember teaching my students like, oh, you can use the highlighter. It's really great. Just make sure that you annotate your passages really well. And one of my students told me that, oh, Jeff, I spent 5-6 minutes reading the passage and highlighting everything, And then I did the first question and clicked next, and it deleted all of her highlights because the highlights were like associated with that first question. I think the ACT has fixed that now, but that's just a small example of some of the things that can go wrong when you roll out these computer-based exams. And it's just another piece of evidence weighing the scale that tells me SAT and ACT are going to have such a hard time if they try to administer a computer-based at-home exam in the fall. I'm like, wow. So yeah, they do have a highlight feature. Yes. Okay. Someone asked me for this during the last test prep webinar, and I realized that I need to do more to help you guys in terms of free resources. So let's start from the top here. Khan Academy for SAT and CAP Test for ACT are the official partners with those respective exams. So those are some good places to go for free resources. I have used Khan Academy. I actually really like it. I've never used CAP Test for ACT, so I can't speak to that. Prep Scholar and Magoosh are like online blogs that people write. They just amass all this great information. Unless if a student is really good at like they love to read, then they can go ahead and read these blogs, and they will learn a lot. I find that these blogs are really great for parents because they often address questions from the parental standpoint. UWorld and 1600.io are these weird niche little websites. UWorld is just some like 18-year-old Stanford kid who just writes and reviews SAT test questions. Like he'll spend an hour and a half, kind of like this webinar, and just go through like every question in like a math section or something. And I think he's really approachable because he's a young kid. So those are my top 6 free resources. And my textbooks, because sometimes you just got to buy a textbook. I like the ACT Black Book here. College Panda, I think, is kind of funny. Sometimes kids respond to that. The Critical Reader is really great for the English section of the ACT and for the writing and language section of the SAT. Official guides, obviously you can't go wrong with official test materials. Aaron's is good for math, not as great for reading and writing. That's just my personal opinion. And Dr. Jang is great for math if you want to get that perfect score. Because I teach students a lot of tips and tricks, as well as, of course, content. But a textbook like Dr. Jang just teach you all the content. So it's quite useful. I have a question someone's asking. Can you please let me know the dates you have shared for SAT and ACT in Dubai? Yes, I can. This previous slide is the international test dates only. They are different from the national test dates in the United States. These are the international test dates. Right now, the ACT is scheduled for June 12th and 13th. Personally, I don't think that's going to happen because they have to be administered at schools, and I'm under the impression that schools are still closed. So why is the ACT so slow about this? Why haven't they come out and canceled the June ACT? That's very annoying. Anyway, the July 17, 18 one should run, inshallah. What are SAT subject test dates? Okay. The good news here is that you can take the SAT subject tests. You have three opportunities for this fall: August, October, and December. Now, if you actually take out a calendar and look at these dates, you'll realize that September 26th and October 3rd are 1 week apart. So the SAT is basically being offered like twice in a row. And I was thinking about that. I was actually really annoyed because I was thinking that's not enough time to prepare. And then I realized, oh, wait, students can just take the regular SAT, September 26th, and then they could take the SAT subject test October 3rd. Bam. So that's kind of what I'd recommend. Another question is the SAT for kids who enjoy English more, or ACT is the one for English lovers? Okay, so I should have a slide for this. The SAT, guys, the SAT is 158 questions. The ACT is 215. That's 30% more. And both tests are 3 hours long. So TBH, the SAT is a better test for students who are really good at math. And why is that? Simply because half of the test is math. If we go back to the start of my presentation, 1 sec, I'll show you something. Let's go back. You'll see that half of your score in the SAT comes from math. And if you do poorly in it, there's just no hiding. On the ACT, the math is only 25% of your score. And if you do poorly in it, that poor score can be offset by a higher score in English reading. Let me just circle something. The English section on the ACT and the writing and language section on the SAT, these are identical. They test the exact same grammar rules, how to use a comma, how to use a semicolon. There are some small differences, but to be honest, they're not worth talking about at this juncture. The reading and science on the ACT are very similar to the reading section on the SAT. In fact, the ACT, you could almost say that the science section is just another reading section. So I find that the ACT is a better test for students who love to read. Because on the ACT, you have to read so fast to get all 215 of those questions answered. I hope that answers your question there. We have another one. Someone says, is the ACT science section as recognized as the SAT science subject tests for an engineering student? Oh, absolutely not. Great question. The ACT science section is not a science section where you need a foundation of knowledge in science. You do not have to know anything about biology or physics to pass ACT science, whereas you have to really know physics to beat the SAT subject test in physics, for example. So yeah, I want to call the ACT science section, I want to put science in quotation marks because it's not science, it's reasoning ability. It's your ability to puzzle out the answers. Another question someone is asking is, what level does your science need to be for the ACT? Is it AP or IB level? To be honest, the science that you need is 7th grade science, and that is the scientific method. That is what is an independent variable, what is a dependent variable. An independent variable is what you change, and a dependent variable is what you measure. The independent variable is your x-axis. The dependent variable is your y-axis. That's it. And that's my go-to line when I tell students, like, when they're like, do I have to know anything about science? Is no, you don't. That being said, if a student is really good at scientists and they love physics, for example, when they get a physics passage on the ACT science section, they might just be more comfortable with the terms and therefore more likely to do better, just because they're not thrown when they see, you know, ohm meters or something. But you don't really need science to pass the ACT science section. I hope that helps. Another person is asking, when do you think registration will open for the SAT August test date? I actually know that off the top of my head. I just looked this up. And if you'll give me 1 second, I can tell you exactly when that is. Oh, hold on 1 sec. You know what? I don't have it right here. The problem is that the SAT and ACT open up registration for each individual school year, which what that means is that they're going to open up the registration sometime in June. And they're going to open up registration for the entire school year, which means you'll be able to register for all the test dates in the fall and the spring. I think it's going to open, if I recall, and I just saw the date, it's like they're going to open it up in June. I'm going to find the answer to that question. Unfortunately, I don't know it right now. Another person asks, do they give priority to people who have not taken the SAT yet? Like for the August exam, seeing as a lot of people would want to take the exam and not everyone will be able to do it. No, they do not give priority to anyone. It's going to be a first come, first serve thing. You just have to register as soon as you can. I'm pretty sure that it's going to happen in the next month. But again, I'm not sure. We'll find out. Registration deadline is always 1 month before the exam date, and SAT does not allow late registration. So we have gone over time a bit here. I had intended for this only to last 30 minutes, but I'm very glad that you guys are asking questions. If you guys have any more questions about standardized tests, I'm very happy to address them. If you see here, if you want to take a free practice test, I can email you guys a diagnostic test that students can take at home. A lot of students are stuck at home these days. If they want to take a full-length practice test, I am more than happy to help them out free of charge. Here's my email address. If anybody wants to write this down, it's jeffrey@haleeducation.com. Feel free to send me an email and I will get back to you. someone asked me, can you please go to the slide with the dates again? Absolutely, absolutely. Here they are. These are the dates. All right. All right. I am going to call it. If you guys have any other questions, again, shoot me an email. I'm going to go look up when registration opens for the August exam, because now I want to find out. I should know that off the top of my head. Someone said thank you. You're very welcome. Thank you for saying thank you. And yeah, I'll see you guys next week for the next presentation. Until then, send me an email if you have any questions. Good night.